The new Moza Force Feedback Yoke, I think most people will agree it's pretty good value, but is that as far as it goes? Moza sent this unit out for testing and review, but will not see this video before it goes live. Now, I normally do this the other way around, but here we're going to get straight into the price. And that's important for what's coming next. So the MOZA Yoke is $699 US and the yoke handle is $149. Let's call it 850 bucks all in, because let's face it, you're going to need both. And the fact that these are two separate products tells another story, which we'll touch on soon. So going back to that price, just keep that $850 in mind, because I'm going to mention something later that's tied to that, and it's almost mind-blowing. Taking it out of the box is a pretty standard experience. As always, Moza does a consistently good job with their packaging. You'll get the base, the power brick, and a USB cable, and then of course the yoke handle, which does come separate. And we'll come back to that when we talk about the build quality. What it doesn't come with are these desk mount clamps. Now, if you plan to mount to a desk and you don't want to drill, you will have to buy these, and they come in around $20 US. It's a super simple design, it's quick and easy to install. Maybe they should have come with the yoke though. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. Moving on to the features now, we'll keep the features quick as it's all stuff that you can read about on their website. There's 9 Newton meters of torque, which is for rotational force. And for comparison, the super high-end Brunner I use right now has around 6 Newton meters. Then there's 210 newtons of pitch force, and that's the force forward and back. And again, for comparison on my high-end Brunner, that's around 110 newtons. Now there's some crazy numbers here, but translating this all into feel is a different story, and we'll cover that in a minute. 90 degrees of rotation all in, and that's just to be expected. And then 150 millimeters of pitch travel, and that's about 10 millimeters less than the high-end Brunner yoke. And for another comparison, I think the honeycomb is around 90 millimeters or thereabouts. So a nice amount of linear throw on the pitch axis. All of these features at a basic level are supposed to let you feel the air travelling over or separating from the wing, along with turbulence and a few other effects like airspeed and ground effects. But we'll cover more of that in the software part of the video. Quickly moving on to the build quality, the first thing I noticed, and I'm confident others will agree with this, is that this base is a big boy. It's heavy, coming in at around 9 kilograms for the base, and it matches up with the build quality in general. I said this before and I'm going to say it again, it's typical Moza build quality. For the price you're going to pay for this, the build quality exceeds those expectations by a country mile. It really does. Although there is 1 or 2 minor areas that don't quite match up to that umbrella statement. Overall though, the base, it's absolutely superb. The casing is full metal, and the yoke handle connection looks like it's polished steel and as solid as it gets. Up close, it holds great quality materials with a high-end finish. Remember, this is 850 bucks. It's incredible. All the metal flip and toggle switches on the base are great. These rubber buttons here, nothing to complain about again. The backlighting is nice across the front of the panel, but we don't yet have the option to customize the color. So for now, we're stuck with this sort of military green color. I'm hoping they will update this in time though. So as the base goes, this might be the best build quality I've seen yet on a force feedback base. Matching that, or maybe even just exceeding the infamous Brunner, which is more than like twice the price. And that's just, that's mind-blowing, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Also earlier, I did mention 1 or 2 minor areas that don't hold up. Now, it's not that they are bad, because they're not. They just don't match up with the rest of the base. And that's the gear lever on the right-hand side and the POV sticks, or thumbsticks, on the yoke handle. And as far as the yoke handle goes, I really love this. It feels like a full-size yoke handle, which is great, but it's a full plastic material. Although this is a high quality plastic with a real premium finish. Like, the finish on this yoke handle is superb. Triggers are also nice. The bumper buttons have a nice dampened feel. But the part that surprises me the most is the connection. The connection between the yoke rod and the wheel is just so solid and quick to connect. There's no real perceivable flex when using one hand to operate, and the plastic for the most part doesn't crack or squeak when using the yoke. If you're looking for it though, you might hear a bit of plastic cracking, but it's really very minimal. Talking about the yoke handle being a separate purchase, I think, now Moza haven't confirmed this in any way, but I think there are more yoke handles coming. And that kind of changes the game a little going forward. Let me know in the comments what style of yoke handle you would love to see. Design-wise, this yoke handle reminds me a little bit of the Turtle Beach Velocity 1 yoke, but like a pro version. Some people like it, others maybe not. Let me know in the comments what you think about the actual design of the yoke. I think the main things that we want to talk about here is the actual feel of the yoke. Now you're going to see me also using these trigger buttons on the back of the yoke for the rudder. And while this does work, and it actually works quite well, you do leave yourself unable to modulate the throttle while you're taking off or coming into land and whatnot. So it does make things a little bit difficult there, but these triggers do work quite well as rudders. And one thing I'll bring your attention to is I'm running the game force feedback gain at 250%. Now that's as high as it goes. So let's take the plane up. So we've got flaps, full throttle. And again, like I said, I do have two hands on the yoke here. I'm just using the trigger button to keep her straight. We go, and then gear up. And flaps. So let's talk about what this is good at first. So where it shines is the weight, the feeling of weight in the yoke itself, and the way you can tune that feeling of weight using different things like friction and inertia inside the software, and we will cover the software. That's really where this yoke is fantastic in that sense. In terms of where it's lacking, I almost feel like there is a lack of force feedback information coming from the sim, or maybe I suppose it's the way that the Moza software might be interpreting that. I mean, it's kind of odd because you can kind of feel it at certain points. You know, you can just kind of feel it rolling up and down, and you obviously get the vibration effects, motor vibrations and stuff. Those all work fairly well, but it's I guess the only way I can explain it is the turbulence setting that's in there right now kind of just feels like a vibration effect. There's glimpses of hope. Like it's, for some odd reason, it's almost like, you know, that slider where we're talking about at 250%. It's almost like I want to be able to slide that all the way up to like 1,000%, so I can actually feel the air start to, you know, manipulate the control surfaces. Because right now I can't feel it, but it's very, very minuscule. And I was going to say dead is a bit of a strong word. It's definitely not dead, but it just needs more. We also get effects that are to do with airspeed. So the faster you're going, the harder it is to deflect a surface, and that feeds through onto the yoke, which is awesome. The engine vibrations, which we spoke about, you know, they're reasonable, not brilliant by any means. There is now It feels like there's a smoother transition from low RPM to higher RPM, and you can adjust that in the software as well. And also, one of the things that I really like is the sheer amount of buttons between the base and the yoke, and actually in particularly the yoke handle. And you can see I've got this hat switch here just mapped to left and right views, which is great if you're on a single screen. And the triggers are mapped to the rudder. You've got a rotary dial on the bottom, which would be good for the magnetos. You got your flaps, your gear up and down, pitot heat, fuel pump, battery, your nav lights, beacon lights, strobe lights. So very basic, but I think fairly useful. There's also a couple of bumper buttons here, and 2 buttons on the top, which are really quite nice quality. Perfect for things like push to talk, for flying on VATSIM, or saying tensions with the the various channels of communications you've got on that now. It's great. We've got essentially four buttons that we could use for that. Now you might be able to see the base design-wise is pretty long, so ideally I feel like you would, ideally in a setup like this, you might have your screen set over the top of the yoke, so it would be much closer to you, not the way that I've got it set up right here. And now I think I mentioned in another part of the video, the yoke itself, the yoke handle, sorry, is very solid. There is hardly any noise coming from it. You get the odd creak, but you really have to listen to it. It stays very stable no matter how much power you're putting through that pitch axis. And it doesn't, like, it's not flexing. It is not flexing. It's a super strong connection to this stainless steel rod. Really quite impressive, that connection. And I think that kind of, I don't know, alludes to the idea or the fact maybe that we will get different yoke handles. That's something I'd absolutely love. So in essence, when you get to the guts of it, what you really want to feel is a manipulation of your control surfaces from the air and wind effects. And basically, we're kind of getting it. I feel like it's there. It just needs amplified. So I think they do have a little bit of work to go in the software. Will they get there? I absolutely think they will. You just have to look at what they've done with sim racing and some of the improvements they've made on that AB9 joystick that they released last year. And I think it's pretty safe to say I think they'll have this nailed in a few months. I can't see any visible latency for the controls. If you check out the switches, it's almost instant, or it is instant actually. It's not almost, it's very instant. No lag, no latency. And again, I'll go back to the smoothness as a whole on the pitch and the roll axis. Could be, and I probably need to test this a little bit more, but I'm feeling like this could be the smoothest yoke I've tried yet. Even when I'm looking for that, sometimes you get those little notches with the belt inside the yoke, inside the control loading system. And even with the minute adjustments to the yoke, and when you're really looking for it, I can't feel anything. It's very, very smooth. So in use, the thing that sticks out the most is the smoothness and the feeling of the weight that can be reproduced. They did an incredible job here, an incredible job. It's up there with the best I've tried in terms of smoothness of both the elevator and the ailerons, and it's snapping at the heels of the high-end yokes, which is crazy even to say that given the price. But I did mention there are a few features missing that I think are pretty big ones. The first one being there's no stick shaker effect at the moment. Now, Moza have told me that this will be in a future software or firmware update, so I'm expecting that soon. The second one is the turbulence and the wind and air effects. It just feels like vibration effects that are being applied to the yoke. There's a lack of feeling to it. It's a little bit repetitive in a way. With some of the other yokes I've tried, you can really feel that unstable air, which can roll on and off smoothly or be strong and abrupt. Some of the other yokes have a very natural feeling, especially in the likes of X-Plane. In Moza's case, it just feels mildly unresponsive and you could say a little bit robotic in a way. I think it's the strength of the effects distributed by the software that's the choke point here. Like, I can feel that there's something there, but it's just not fully coming through. There's something that needs heavily amplified there. Not only that, the way it's applied and delivered needs to be a little bit more nuanced. The biggest thing that's missing though is the trim. The yoke will not move back and forth under the trim, nor will you be able to trim using pressure. And I always say to people, if there's one reason to get a force feedback yoke, it's for the trim effect. I believe this will be implemented soon though, as there's a trim section now in the software, although at the point of this video it wasn't working how I thought it would. All these things could and will all change. The hardware seems to be right where it needs to be. It actually punches way above its weight, in fact. It's a fantastic piece of hardware. It just needs the software to catch up. I'm confident that they will get there though. But as it sits at the moment, the strength of the force feedback effects and the type of effects and the way they're coming through, it needs tweaked. Let's jump back onto the sim and have a look through the softwares. There's a couple of interesting things here. So we're in the Moza cockpit software. And basically for the yoke, it's split into two sections. You've got the yoke handle and the yoke base. And this is where all the settings and everything is configured. And most of the stuff you'd want to be looking at will be in the yoke base. So we can see in here, one of the more important things to look at is the basic settings at the top and the force feedback mode. So we have direct input, telemetry, and integrated. Now the only two I really use is telemetry and integrated. Now integrated is basically direct input and the telemetry combined. One of the things that I praise about this yoke is the smoothness. I've probably already said it, but there's also something about the weight, the feeling of weight in the actual yoke handle is incredible, and it's very, very easy to fine tune in the software. And they've done a fantastic job with this part of the software. And it's in here where you can get a real feel for exactly how strong this base can be. If we take the spring up to 100%, and you can see I'm really struggling with one hand to push that forward or back. You can see it's moving the whole bloody table. We punch that back down to 15, 16%, and you can see much, much easier. The same goes with like the inertia and the damper. Both of these adding a sense of weight to the yoke in slightly different ways. And this is definitely somewhere where you'd spend a lot of time tuning to get it to feel like the way you want it to feel. But we'll also touch on a few other things here. We've got maximum torque output and overall feedback intensity and game force feedback gain. Now you'll see I've got all of these at the absolute max, and I still feel like the feedback that you should get from the deflection of your surfaces and air movement is just not enough. Now, when it comes to the telemetry part of the force feedback, all this stuff works pretty well. In fact, I'm actually very fond of the vibration effects you get for like the flaps when the flaps are moving up and down. It feels real nice. There's a lot of stuff in here you might want to turn on or off. There's one here, the turbulence at the bottom. Now, I feel like that turbulence is just a vibrational turbulence sort of feedback effect. But that effect there from the telemetry or the data really isn't delivering the sort of unstable air, the kind of smooth rolling on and off. We'll run through the general aircraft effects very quickly. You got G-forces, which I've turned off straight away, stall buffet, elevator droop, got flap motion on because it actually feels brilliant, gear buffet, buffeting frequency, minimum intensity speed, gear motion, ground vibration, speed brake buffet, spoiler motion. These are all things that you need to spend a lot of time on tweaking to get them feeling just the way you want it to. We've got jet aircraft effects and propeller aircraft effects, which is quite a nice way to do it. Propeller rumble, engine rumble. You've got some stuff there for angle of attack, the speed sensitivity of the control surface. So when you're flying at higher speeds, your aircraft should be a little bit tighter, it should feel tighter and harder to manipulate that surface. And then when you're low and slow, it should feel pretty dead. And that works fairly well. These other things we're not going to bother with. Then we can go to the axis travel. Now you can tune the axis curve. I haven't touched any of that. I've just left it as is. And your axis force. These are all curves you can adjust. And you can turn the centering force on or off. And then there's this special column at the end. Now this is the trimming. So I haven't been able to get this to work the way that I think it should. Essentially what I'm trying to get to happen is when I trim up or trim down, I just want the yoke to slowly move out or in. And I want to be able to feel that pressure and then trim against that pressure to trim out an aircraft. I haven't been able to get this to work yet. I think that is a new addition to the software. I don't think it's fully finished yet, but I'm told that it's on its way. So as the software goes, it's pretty in-depth. There's a lot of stuff you can adjust in here, and it can get a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's very well laid out. It's well designed, and you've got little tooltips about what each effect actually adjusts, which is extremely helpful. You've also got your preset menu. So there are presets for DCS, Microsoft Flight Simulator, X-Plane. There's a heap of presets in here. And I think this is all mixed in with the AB9 base as well. So it's all running off of this one preset list. Now, if we come into the yoke handle, again, you get some simple things like you can adjust the brightness of the yoke handle. But what's a bit odd about this is we can actually adjust things on the base in the yoke handle section, like the backlight brightness. And hopefully you can see on the side camera there, that brightness moving up and down. And then if you want to check out the compatible games, you can see on the right-hand side here, Flight Simulator 2024, X-Plane 12. Then we've got DCS and IL2. So the list of games is starting to come together. And that's it basically for the software. Now, as good as the software is in terms of layout, the way it works, how it feeds you or gives you the information for the adjustments you might want to make, I do think that the software is holding the yoke back in terms of the feedback that it's physically sending to the yoke base. But at the same time, having watched this progress, I'm very confident that they'll have this sorted out in no time. Okay, the pros and cons. The pros first. You just can't ignore the price. It's mind-blowing for just $850 for a base and a handle. The smoothness of both axes is superb. The build quality, even taking the price out of it, is just top-notch. The software has a nice UI. The strength of both axes is more than you'll probably ever need. Now, I did compare the strength and numbers of the Brunner to the Moza at the start of the video, and that would make you think that it's way stronger than the Brunner, but that's not actually the case. They seem fairly equal. Maybe the Moza could pump out just a little bit more power, but there's really not much in it. Finally, there's a ton of buttons and switches on the base and the yoke handle itself, and it's great. Now the cons, and there's only one here, and it's the software. But not the UI or the integration or the ease of use, because that stuff's all fine. In fact, it's great. It's the missing effects and the sort of dull feedback. That's the only con. Now, I think the main question here is, based on everything we have talked about, is there value? But taking everything into consideration, I'd say there's bags of value, and you just can't argue with $850 for both of these combined compared to what else you can get out in the market. I can even say I reckon this might be the best value force feedback yoke you can get at the moment. If I was going to sum it all up, the Moza Force Feedback Yoke is incredible at this price point. Is it the best feeling yoke in the sim? No, it's a fair bit off. But the interesting part is it could be. That's what's crazy about this whole package. The hardware is there, it absolutely is. If they can get the software up to speed, and I think they will, when they do that, this will be an absolute no-brainer. If you want to purchase one of these right now, I'd just be prepared to run with it as it is until they get a handle on what needs to be developed in the software. I wouldn't be surprised if all these things have been addressed in the next, say, 3 to 6 months. So it's definitely not the best yoke, but it's certainly the best value. The potential is there, it's just waiting to be unlocked.